The first time I met Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan, and we named him Terry the Hulk Boulder was his ring name here. He came to town in an old wore-out van with his buddy, Ed Leslie, which went on to become Brutus the Barber Beefcake in the WWF. He was very green in the business. He had been trained by Hiro Matsuda down in Tampa, but had no ring experience to speak of. So he was very, very green, a young, I think about 21-year-old, something like that, or maybe 23-year-old at the time. And he was very nervous in the ring. And he learned a lot here and also got his first major push here. Louis Tilley was our booker at the time, and Terry was actually playing bass guitar in a rock and roll band, and he came over, if I'm not mistaken, it was, I think, from Augusta, Georgia. He'd been playing there. The wrestling deal did not work out for him in Florida for numbers of reasons, and, you know, no need to go into that. It was, but anyway, he came here and wanted to be a wrestler. And I remember Louis was a French Canadian. He just passed away about a year ago at age 89. And Louis says, "I want you to be a wrestler," with that accent. And actually, even though Hiro Matsuda had trained him, Terry lacked a lot of knowledge about in-ring activity, like hold your arm over that top rope, don't go like this in a counter because you'll go between number 3 and number 2. A lot of things like that he had to be taught. And he had very little moves. In fact, he was a sensation because he had a stellar career, and he did very little in the ring. Because of his size and everything, he wasn't, I don't think, as athletically prone as a lot of the smaller guys were. And he had limited moves. He could throw the foot up coming off the rope and hit the guy, and he'd drop the leg. And that was about his only maneuvers the first couple of years in the wrestling business. Within 4 or 5 weeks of being in the wrestling business in the Pensacola, what we call this territory, he faced Andre the Giant, 1979. Yeah, Vince, we had him a long time before you did, in the Houston County Farm Center. It was a night I'll never forget. The place was oversold. There were probably close to 6,000 people in the building. And there were about 2,000 people outside that wanted to get in that couldn't. And it was amazing. Andre helped him through the match and was a great, great asset to Hogan through the years. Andre took a liking to Terry, and he helped him out and put him over in every way that he could. The interesting thing about the Dothan Andre match was the next day we had him on TV. And so that night, the Saturday night, after the Friday night deal at the Farm Center, we had a building over in New Brockton, Alabama, Coffee County Farm Center, seated about 3,500 people on the floor and the stands together. And we put about 4,000 people in that Saturday night for the return match from the Friday night match of Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant after a little episode on TV with arm wrestling.
Evenly matched so far. An even match. Billy Spears at ringside, shouting encouragement to his Hulk. Right now it's even, Dickie Steinborn.
The first time that I know of, and the only time wrestling has been held, at Rip Hughes Stadium. We went outdoors with that match. Jim Oates was the recreation director. He passed away a couple of years ago. Jim was a great guy and really helped. He was so instrumental in whatever you guys need, we'll do. And a lot of folks said, y'all are crazy, going to a stadium with that match. You know, that's in the summertime, it was hot. Probably around 8,000 people were at Rip Hughes Stadium for Hulk Hogan versus Harley Race for the world title. On that card, we also had, and a lot of people say, all these folks came through Dothan. We had Jack Briscoe, Jerry Briscoe. We also had the Samoans, Afa and Sika Anoa'i, whose bloodline is still going today. All of those people, plus a lot that I can't even mention, there's probably about 20 guys on that card. But it was an all-star from the opening match. The second match were the Samoans. So that tells you how good the talent was all the way through. This area had the great talent because Ron Fuller was a very fair guy in payoff. And the Pensacola territory, the longest trip you had was from Pensacola to Birmingham. Well, most wrestling territories, or a lot of them I'll say, you might have to travel 400 or 500 miles between towns. But down here, if you live in the Pensacola territory, most of the guys lived in Pensacola. Mobile was 45 minutes away. Dothan was 2.5 hours away. And then Birmingham was the longest shot. Montgomery was in between. And they could hang out on the beach till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, jump in the car, go work 30 minutes in the ring, be back home with the family, and then go again to the beach the next day and have a good time. It was the garden spot that all the great talent wanted to come here. Nobody wanted to leave. Everybody wanted to come to Pensacola. No, I think it was because of his charisma and his learn of how to talk. When he was here, he was not a good guy on the microphone by any means. He was just starting out. But later, he also had a stint at AWA for Vern Gagne. Vince Sr. hired him and fired him. He went to AWA, and then when Vince Jr. bought the business from his dad, brought him back, that's when they started the Hulkamania run. But he learned a lot through the territories that he came through. He was briefly in Atlanta for Jim Barnett as Sterling Golden. We had him as Terry the Hulk Boulder. He goes to Atlanta, and Barnett, for whatever reason, liked the name Sterling Golden. So he was Sterling Golden for probably 5 or 6 weeks in his career, and then he went to Memphis as the Hulk. So he got a lot of experience real quick. And yes, he was a phenomenal talent for this territory especially, because this territory always thrived more on smaller guys that were more athletic and moved constantly in the ring. They kept your eye on that ring, goes arm drag, hip toss, arm drag, hip toss, all kind of good moves. These guys were good at working together. And your bigger guys like Hogan, Ox Baker, Abdullah the Butcher, they didn't mean a whole lot. Now, Hogan did because he was a phenomenal looking thing when he came here. But the people like Abdullah and some of the weirder people in the industry that would draw big in New York wouldn't draw a plug nickel in this territory. This territory was used to people wrestling. It was what was on the marquee, and they gave you wrestling. And it was all because the Welch family trained most of the people that worked down here. It was a unique territory. He was a sensation to the business in general because he took it to another level when they got national television and things like that. But I look at it like this, the truth of the matter. He started out as a wrestler journeyman, living in a van because he wasn't making much money. Right down here when he first started, payoffs of maybe $35, $40, $50 a night. And from that, went on to be multi-millionaire. Then he would face all kind of different pitfalls in his life, family-wise, business-wise, and dead at 71. You have to wonder, I respect him, but was it really worth it? That's the question. The one thing I'll say that gives a lot of people some peace, Terry, late in life, 2 years ago, was baptized, accepted Christ as a Savior. When all those years, doing this, yeah, and then decide it was time for him to humble down and look at something different. He was a unique character, and character is what he was. He had so many different phases in his life, but I'll remember him as a young guy who came here as a bass guitar player in a rock and roll band, wanting to be a professional wrestler. And he became a sensation. I'll also say this, and I'm being very honest. I'm like former NWA World Heavyweight Champion Lou Thez said about him. On wrestling ability, I'll give him a 2. On charisma and drawing power, a 10 plus. He could get them in a building, but really the talent as far as what's on the marquee, wrestling, he didn't really have that. He created sports entertainment.